I'm Margaret Williams, 68, and I never thought I'd be sitting alone on Christmas Eve, staring at 9 empty stockings hanging from my mantel. 2 hours ago, I overheard my son Michael whispering to his wife in my kitchen, "Just dump all 9 kids on her. Mom's desperate for family time, she'll never say no." The laughter that followed froze my heart. 45 years of hosting Christmas gatherings, of being the family backbone. And this is how they see me? A convenient babysitter? Well, they'll all be surprised when they arrive tomorrow. Christmas is definitely still on, just not the one they're expecting. Before I dive into this family drama that changed everything for me, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you curled up with hot cocoa preparing for your own family holiday? Or maybe hiding in the bathroom for a moment of peace from your relatives? Drop a comment below and let me know. If you've ever felt taken for granted by family, especially during the holidays, hit that like button and subscribe to see how I finally stood up for myself after decades of putting everyone else first. I should probably introduce myself properly. I'm Margaret Williams, a widow for 5 years now since my Frank passed away from a sudden heart attack. We were married for 43 beautiful, though sometimes challenging years. I spent most of my working life as an elementary school teacher, mostly 4th grade, before retiring 8 years ago. Frank and I raised 3 children together: Michael, my oldest at 45, Rachel, who's 42, and David, our youngest at 39. Between the 3 of them, I've been blessed with 9 wonderful grandchildren. Michael has 4 kids with his wife Jennifer, twins James and Jacob, who are 15, Emily, who's 12, and little Aiden, who just turned 8. Rachel has 3 with her husband Thomas, Sophia, who's 13, Lily, who's 10, and Ethan, who's 7. David has 2 with his wife Catherine, Grace, who's 6, and Noah, who's 3. I adore each one of them, with their unique personalities and quirks. Since Frank and I bought our Victorian home back in 1983, we've been the central gathering spot for every family holiday. We spent years lovingly restoring this old house, with Frank handling most of the woodworking himself. The spacious dining room can comfortably seat 16 people, and the living room has that beautiful bay window where we always place our 12-foot Christmas tree. Every corner of this house holds memories of holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, and casual Sunday dinners. Christmas has always been special for us. Frank and I established traditions that have carried through for over 4 decades. I start baking cookies the first week of December. Frank used to hang all the outdoor lights, and I'd decorate the tree with ornaments we'd collected from every vacation we ever took. We'd have Christmas Eve dinner, followed by a gift exchange for the adults, and then Christmas morning with stockings and presents for the grandchildren. I still remember how Frank would dress as Santa when the grandkids were little, his deep laugh filling the house with joy. After Frank died, I was determined to keep our traditions alive. It hasn't been easy doing it alone, but I felt it was important for the family, especially the grandchildren. Each year, I spend weeks preparing, decorating, cooking, and shopping. The physical toll has gotten harder. My arthritis makes standing in the kitchen for hours painfully difficult, but I've never complained. I wanted the children to have the same magical Christmas memories I had growing up, and that their parents had in this very house. But things have shifted in these 5 years without Frank. At first, the kids helped out more, aware that I was grieving and overwhelmed. But gradually, they started taking my efforts for granted. Last Christmas, not one of them offered to help with dishes after dinner. The year before that, Michael and Jennifer arrived 3 hours late with no warning, throwing off the entire dinner schedule. Rachel has borrowed money 3 times this year, with vague promises to pay me back. David often drops his children off for me to watch last minute when he and Catherine want a night out. I've started feeling less like a cherished mother and grandmother, and more like a convenience. A free babysitter, a source of loans, a guaranteed holiday meal. But I've smiled through it all, telling myself that family comes first and that Frank would want me to keep everyone together and happy. The physical exhaustion after these gatherings has become almost unbearable. Last Christmas, I spent 2 days in bed recovering from the strain of cooking, cleaning, and entertaining. No one called to check on me. I've been burying my resentment beneath my grandmother's smile, but it's been growing steadily, like a pot about to boil over. Which brings me to yesterday, Christmas Eve morning, when I was about to learn exactly how my children really saw me. Christmas Eve morning started like any other in recent years. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. to begin preparations, even though dinner wouldn't be until 6 p.m. The turkey needed to be prepped, potatoes peeled, and the dough for my famous dinner rolls needed time to rise. I had just put the cranberry sauce on to simmer when I heard cars pulling up outside. My children and their families always come over early on Christmas Eve, ostensibly to help prepare for the evening, though in reality they mostly sit around drinking coffee while I work. Still, I love having them in the house, the sounds of my grandchildren's excited voices filling the rooms that too often feel empty these days. "Grandma!" little Noah shouted as he burst through the door, running straight for my legs. I bent down to hug him, my back protesting the motion. "Merry Christmas Eve, sweetheart," I said, kissing his chubby cheek. The rest of the family filed in, each giving me a quick hug before dispersing throughout the house. The children immediately headed for the cookie plate I'd set out, while the adults gathered in the living room. I continued working in the kitchen, listening to the muffled sounds of conversation and laughter from the other room. Around noon, I was mixing the stuffing when Michael and Jennifer came into the kitchen. They didn't seem to notice me standing by the pantry as they filled their coffee cups. "Did you tell your mom about our plans for tomorrow?" Jennifer asked, keeping her voice low. "Not yet," Michael replied. "I'll mention it tonight after dinner. She won't mind." "Are you sure? It's last minute, and we're supposed to be here for Christmas Day breakfast and presents." Michael laughed, a sound I rarely heard directed at me anymore. "Just dump all 9 kids on her. Mom's desperate for family time, she'll never say no. She'll probably be thrilled to have them all day while we're at the resort. What about Rachel and David? Won't they be upset if we bail?" "Actually," Michael said, lowering his voice further, "they're in on it too. Rachel and Thomas got invited to that party at the Hendersons, and David and Catherine want to go to that new spa for couples treatments. We all figured Mom could watch all the kids, then we'd come back for dinner. She'll never know the difference." Jennifer giggled. "It's perfect. She's always saying how she wishes she had more time with the grandkids." "Exactly," Michael agreed. "Plus, she can never say no. Remember Thanksgiving when she was clearly exhausted but still insisted on sending everyone home with leftovers? She's predictable that way. And she's already done all the shopping and wrapping," Jennifer added. "All we have to do is show up at the end of the day and take credit." They clinked their coffee mugs together and walked back toward the living room, never noticing me standing there, completely frozen. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down the mixing bowl. Their words echoed in my mind, each one a tiny dagger. Desperate for family time, never say no, predictable, take credit. Is that really how they saw me? As nothing more than a convenient, reliable old woman who could be manipulated into providing free childcare on Christmas Day? I felt physically ill. Leaning against the counter, I tried to steady my breathing. From the other room, I could hear more laughter, and I wondered if they were all in on the joke. Was I really such a pathetic figure to them? For a moment, I considered confronting them immediately, marching into that living room and demanding an explanation. But something stopped me. A lifetime of keeping the peace, of putting others' needs before my own, had conditioned me to swallow my feelings. And honestly, I needed time to process what I'd heard, to decide how to respond. So I wiped my eyes, straightened my Christmas apron, and returned to preparing the stuffing as if nothing had happened. When Rachel came in a few minutes later asking if I needed help, I smiled and gave her a small task, all while my mind raced with what I'd overheard. Throughout the rest of the afternoon, I observed my children with new eyes. I noticed how they checked their phones while I talked, how they'd volunteer to help only to disappear after 5 minutes, how they'd make plans amongst themselves without including me. Had it always been this way, and I'd been too eager to please to notice? Or had this disregard grown gradually since Frank died, like a weed taking advantage of vulnerable soil? When they all left around 4 p.m. to go home and change for dinner, promising to return in 2 hours, I simply nodded and smiled. Not one of them offered to stay and help with final preparations. Not one of them seemed to notice the hurt in my eyes or the tremble in my hands. And not one of them had any idea what I was planning to do next. After they left, the house fell into a silence that seemed to echo with Michael's words. "Just dump all 9 kids on her." I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where Frank and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd helped our children with homework, where we'd planned our future together. I placed my hands flat on the cool wood surface and took a deep breath. For the first time in perhaps decades, I allowed myself to really feel the resentment and hurt I'd been suppressing. Why did I always have to be the one who sacrificed? Why was it acceptable for my children to take, and take without giving back. Frank wouldn't have tolerated this behavior from them. He'd always taught them about respect and reciprocity. "What would you do, Frank?" I whispered to the empty room, half expecting to hear his deep voice offering wisdom, as he so often had in life. The answer came not in his voice, but in a certainty that settled over me. I deserved better. I'd spent my entire adult life putting my family first. I'd raised 3 children to adulthood, supported them through college, marriages, and the births of their own children. I'd been there for every crisis, every celebration, every ordinary Tuesday. And now, in my late 60s, with arthritis making every holiday preparation an exercise in pain management, they couldn't even be bothered to help, or worse, to be honest with me. I pulled out a notepad and began making a list of everything I typically did for Christmas Day. Prepare a special breakfast casserole, stuff stockings, organize present opening, cook a midday meal, clean up, prepare snacks, supervise the children, cook dinner, clean up again, and send everyone home with carefully packaged leftovers. The list filled an entire page. Next, I made a list of what my children had planned to contribute, show up. The contrast was stark and infuriating. But what could I do? Christmas was tomorrow. The grandchildren were expecting presents and stockings and all the magic I normally provided. I couldn't bear to disappoint them, even if their parents deserved a wake-up call. That's when I had an idea. I reached for my phone and called my sister Eleanor. Unlike me, Ellie had never married or had children. She traveled extensively and lived a life that sometimes made me secretly envious. We'd grown closer since Frank died, though we didn't see each other as often as I'd like. "Maggie?" she answered, her voice bright. "Merry Christmas Eve. I was just thinking about you wrangling that whole crew tomorrow." "That's actually why I'm calling," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need some advice." I told her everything, the overheard conversation, years of feeling taken for granted, my growing resentment, and my uncertainty about what to do next. "Oh, Maggie," she sighed when I finished. "I've watched this happening for years but never said anything. You've always been so determined to keep the family traditions going." "I know," I admitted. "But I can't do it anymore, Ellie. Not like this." "Then don't," she said simply. "What if you just didn't be there tomorrow?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you left them a note and went somewhere else for Christmas? Let them figure it out for once." The idea was so shocking, so contrary to everything I'd ever done, that I almost dismissed it immediately. But something about it resonated deep within me. Where would I even go on Christmas Day? "Come to me," Ellie said without hesitation. "I'm at that mountain resort I told you about, the one with the amazing spa. They've got rooms available. I already asked, because I was hoping you might join me after your family left. Come tonight instead." I hesitated, thinking of 9 excited grandchildren arriving to find no grandmother, no presents, no Christmas magic. As if reading my thoughts, Ellie added, "You could leave the presents for the kids, set everything up so they don't miss out, but let the adults handle the rest for once." The more I considered it, the more right it felt. This wasn't about punishing my grandchildren. It was about showing my adult children that I wasn't a doormat to be walked all over. It was about finally standing up for myself. I spent the next hour making arrangements. I called the resort and booked a room next to Ellie's for 3 nights. I packed a suitcase with essentials and a few nice outfits for dinners. I printed directions to the resort, a 2-hour drive into the mountains. But the most important part was figuring out how to handle Christmas for my grandchildren. I wrapped their remaining presents and arranged them under the tree. I prepared the breakfast casserole and left it in the refrigerator with simple heating instructions. I even filled their stockings and hung them back on the mantel. Then I sat down to write the hardest letter of my life. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, with a light dusting of snow that made everything look like a holiday card. I'd been awake since 4:30 a.m., my normal time to start Christmas preparations, but today was different. Instead of heading to the kitchen to start the coffee and breakfast casserole, I was putting the final touches on my plan. I moved through the house with purpose, checking each detail. In the living room, 9 stockings hung from the mantel, each embroidered with a grandchild's name and stuffed with small gifts, candy, and oranges in the toe, just as I'd done every year. Under the tree, presents were arranged by family, each pile with a different wrapping paper to keep things organized. In the kitchen, I placed a handwritten note with instructions for the breakfast casserole on top of the refrigerator. I set the dining table with my Christmas china, leaving sticky notes to indicate where serving dishes should go. I even pre-measured coffee grounds and filled the water reservoir in the coffee maker so all they'd need to do was press a button. For each grandchild, I'd created a special gift bag with activities to keep them occupied, coloring books and crayons for the younger ones, puzzle books for the older ones, and a new board game for them all to share. These I arranged on the coffee table with a festive sign: Christmas fun for everyone. Finally, I placed the letter I'd stayed up half the night, writing in the center of the kitchen counter, propped against the cookie jar where it couldn't be missed. It read, "Dear Michael, Rachel, David, and families. If you're reading this, you've arrived for Christmas morning and found me gone. I'm safe and well, just not here. Last night, I overheard a conversation that broke my heart. I learned that all of you planned to dump your children with me today while you went off to enjoy yourselves, knowing I could never say no. I discovered that the time and effort I put into creating a special Christmas for our family is not appreciated but expected, even taken advantage of. For 45 years, I have poured my heart into making our family holidays special. I have cooked and cleaned and shopped and wrapped while my arthritis screamed in protest, because I believed that bringing our family together was worth any personal sacrifice. I did it out of love, not obligation. And I thought you participated out of the same love and respect. I was wrong, and I need to take responsibility for my part in creating this situation. By never setting boundaries, by always saying yes even when I should have said no, I've taught you to see me as a resource rather than a person with needs and feelings of my own. So I've decided to spend Christmas taking care of myself for once. I've joined Aunt Eleanor at Mountain Pine Resort, where I'll be staying until December 28th. The presents for the children are under the tree, their stockings are filled. Breakfast is prepared and just needs heating. The turkey is in the refrigerator with cooking instructions attached. This isn't about punishing the grandchildren, whom I love more than words can express. It's about showing you, my adult children, that I deserve to be treated with respect and consideration. It's about teaching you that my love cannot be taken for granted. I hope you'll use this time to reflect on how we've been relating to each other since your father died. I hope you'll think about the example you're setting for your own children about how to treat aging parents. I'll see you in 3 days. Merry Christmas. Love. Mom. I read the letter once more, my heart pounding. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to walk away from my family on Christmas morning after nearly half a century of tradition? The answer came as I glanced at my reflection in the hallway mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, a woman who had gradually allowed herself to become a convenience rather than a person. Frank would be disappointed not in my decision to leave, but in how long I'd allowed myself to be diminished. With trembling hands, I placed the letter on the counter, gathered my suitcase and purse, and took one last look around my beautifully decorated home. The tree lights twinkled in the pre-dawn darkness. 9 stockings hung expectantly. Everything was perfect, ready for a family Christmas just without the family matriarch who usually made it all happen. If you've ever had to make a difficult choice between pleasing others and respecting yourself, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Standing in my own hallway, suitcase in hand, questioning everything. Have you ever reached your breaking point with family and had to take a stand? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to realize your own worth, and my rock bottom was about to change everything. As I closed the door behind me, locking it with the key I'd leave in the usual hiding spot, I felt a mixture of guilt, anxiety, and something else. Something that took me a moment to identify. Liberation. The drive to the resort was surreal. The sun rose over the mountains as Christmas music played softly on the radio. Several times, I nearly turned around, my lifetime habit of self-sacrifice almost overriding my new resolution. But each time, I remembered Michael's dismissive laugh, Jennifer's conspiratorial giggle, and I pressed on. Mountain Pine Resort appeared around a bend in the road, its grand lodge decorated with twinkling lights and evergreen garlands. As I pulled into the parking lot, wet snow beginning to fall, my phone rang. It was Michael. I let it go to voicemail, then turned my phone off completely. This was harder than I'd imagined, but I needed to stand firm. Eleanor was waiting in the lobby, elegant as always in a red cashmere sweater. When she saw me, her face lit up, then grew concerned. "You actually did it," she said, embracing me tightly. "Are you okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The enormity of what I'd done was hitting me all at once. "Come on," she said gently, taking my suitcase. "Let's get you settled in. Then we're going to have the best Christmas either of us has had in years." As we walked toward the elevator, I wondered what was happening at my house. Had they arrived yet? Found my letter? What chaos had ensued? For once, I decided, it wasn't my problem to solve. I didn't turn my phone back on until after Eleanor, and I had enjoyed a leisurely breakfast in the resort's restaurant. The mountain view was spectacular, the food delicious, and for the first time in years, I wasn't exhausted before the day had properly begun. Still, I couldn't stop wondering about what was happening back home. When I finally powered up my phone, it immediately began buzzing with notifications. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, 2 voicemails. I took a deep breath and started with the voicemails. The first was from Michael, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Mom, what the hell is this? Where are you? Call me immediately." The second, from Rachel, sounded tearful. "Mom, please call us. We're all here and the kids are asking for you. We're sorry, okay? Please come home." I sighed and started reading through the text messages. They followed a predictable pattern. First shock and anger, then bargaining, and finally, in the most recent ones, something approaching understanding. Michael's texts were the most defensive. "I can't believe you'd do this to the kids. Real mature, Mom." Then, "Fine. Be dramatic. We'll handle Christmas without you." And finally, "I guess I see your point. Call me when you're ready to talk." Rachel was more emotional. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you felt this way." Then a flood of messages explaining how stressed she was with the kids and work, how she didn't mean to take advantage, how much she appreciated everything I did. Her last message was a photo of all 9 grandchildren in front of the tree with a sign they'd made. "We miss you, Grandma." David's response surprised me most. His first message was incredulous. "You actually left? On Christmas?" But his later ones showed more self-awareness. "I just reread your letter for the 5th time. I get it now. We've been selfish. I'm sorry, Mom. Truly." His final message, "Take the time you need. We're figuring it out." The kids are actually having fun watching us adults scramble. My daughters-in-law and son-in-law had also texted. Jennifer's messages were clearly damage control. "Margaret, we all value everything you do for the family. Please come home so we can talk about this properly." Catherine was more direct. "I feel terrible about our plans for today. You're right to be upset. Take all the time you need." Thomas, Rachel's husband, simply wrote, "We screwed up. Sorry." The most surprising communication came from James, Michael's 15-year-old son, who rarely texted me. "Grandma, Dad showed us your letter. It's messed up what they were going to do. Enjoy your vacation. We're making them cook and clean everything themselves." Eleanor watched as I scrolled through the messages, her eyebrow raised. "Well?" she asked. "What's the verdict?" "Chaos, initially," I said, showing her some of the earlier messages. "But they seem to be figuring it out, and maybe even understanding why I left." "Are you going to call them?" I considered this. "Not yet. I'll text the grandchildren to let them know I love them and wish them Merry Christmas. But the adults can wait a bit longer." I composed a loving message to my grandchildren, explaining that Grandma needed a little vacation but had made sure Santa knew where to find them. Then I turned my phone to silent and put it away. Throughout the day, I received updates from various family members. Rachel sent photos of the breakfast they'd managed to make, the casserole slightly burned around the edges. David texted a video of the kids opening presents, their excited voices filling my hotel room. Michael sent a picture of the dining room table, set somewhat haphazardly but with clear effort. Around midday, Jennifer called. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Margaret?" She sounded surprised that I'd picked up. "How are you?" "I'm well, Jennifer. How are things there?" She laughed nervously. "Honestly, a bit chaotic. But we're managing. The kids are having fun, actually. They think it's hilarious watching their parents try to figure out all the things you usually handle." There was an awkward pause before she continued, her voice softer. "I want to apologize for what you overheard. It was thoughtless and unkind. We've taken you for granted, and I'm sorry." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, not quite ready to offer absolution. The others want to talk to you too. We're planning to call on FaceTime tonight, if that's okay. All of us together? I agreed to a call at 7, then hung up, feeling oddly lighter. Eleanor and I spent the afternoon enjoying the resort's amenities. We took a guided nature walk through the snowy woods, had hot chocolate by a roaring fire in the main lodge, and even booked massages for the following day. All activities I'd never have experienced if I'd been hosting Christmas as usual. At 7 sharp, my phone rang with a FaceTime call from Rachel. When I answered, I saw all 3 of my children and their spouses crowded around the screen, with my grandchildren visible in the background playing with their new toys. "Merry Christmas, Mom," they said, almost in unison, their faces a mixture of contrition and concern. "Merry Christmas," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "How has your day been?" They exchanged glances before Michael spoke. "Different, eye-opening. We had no idea how much you do until we had to do it ourselves." "The turkey's still not done," David added with a rueful smile. "Turns out none of us really knows how to cook one. And the kids have been asking for you all day," Rachel said. "They miss you." "I miss them too," I admitted. "But this was something I needed to do." "We understand," Michael said, his usual bravado absent. "I'm sorry about what you overheard. It was thoughtless and disrespectful." "It was," I agreed. "And not just what you said, but what you were planning to do, using me as convenient childcare without even asking." They all looked properly ashamed. "You're right," Rachel said. "We've been taking advantage of your generosity. It stops today." They asked to see Eleanor, who waved cheerfully at them. They showed me the somewhat messy living room, the kitchen with dishes piled high, and finally brought all 9 grandchildren to the screen for me to wish them Merry Christmas individually. As the call ended, David asked, "Will you be home on the 28th as your letter said?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I'll be back then." "Good," he nodded. "We'd like to have a family meeting if that's okay. All the adults. We have some things to discuss." After hanging up, I sat quietly, processing the conversation. They seemed genuinely remorseful, but only time would tell if anything would actually change. Still, it was a start. "Well?" Eleanor asked. "How do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. Sad that I'm missing Christmas with the grandchildren, but also proud of myself for finally standing up for my own needs, and hopeful that maybe this will lead to some real changes. Eleanor raised her glass of wine in a toast to setting boundaries, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I clinked my glass against hers. "To boundaries," I agreed. Better late than never. Christmas dinner at Mountain Pine Resort was nothing like the hectic meals I'd grown accustomed to preparing. Eleanor and I were seated at a table near a window overlooking the snow-covered mountains. A pianist played Christmas carols in the background, and the room was decorated with tasteful evergreen arrangements and twinkling lights. "This is so civilized," I marveled as a server poured wine into my glass. "No one has spilled anything or complained about the vegetables." Eleanor laughed. "Welcome to Christmas as an adult without child-wrangling responsibilities." The meal was exquisite, prime rib cooked to perfection, roasted vegetables, decadent desserts, and I didn't have to cook or clean any of it. For the first time in decades, I savored each bite without jumping up every few minutes to refill someone's plate or fetch another napkin. "You know," I said as we lingered over coffee and dessert, "Frank and I never once had a holiday meal, just the 2 of us. From the moment we got married, we were always hosting someone, his parents, my parents, friends who had nowhere else to go. Would Frank have enjoyed something like this?" Eleanor asked. I thought about it, really thought about it instead of automatically defending our traditions. "Yes," I finally said. "He would have. He loved our big family gatherings, but he also valued quiet and peace. We talked about traveling more after retirement, maybe spending Christmas in different places around the world. But then he got sick, and you've been carrying on as if nothing changed," Eleanor finished gently, "even though everything did." After dinner, we joined other guests in the main lodge for hot cider and Christmas stories. A woman about my age struck up a conversation, and when I mentioned my situation, she nodded in understanding. "I did something similar 5 years ago," she confided. "My daughter and her husband expected me to watch their children 4 days a week while they worked. No discussion, no compensation, just an assumption that as a grandmother, I'd be available whenever they needed me. I finally had to set some boundaries. Did it work?" I asked. She smiled. It did. We had some difficult conversations, but in the end, we established a schedule that worked for all of us. They now see me as a person with my own life, not just a free babysitting service. Throughout the day, I received more messages from my family. Photos of their somewhat chaotic Christmas dinner, videos of the children playing games, and updates on how they were managing. They were clearly making an effort to show me they were handling things, though I could see the strain in their smiling faces. That evening, Eleanor and I FaceTimed with all 3 families gathered in my living room. The house looked messier than I'd ever have allowed, with wrapping paper still strewn about and dishes visible on tables, but everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. The grandchildren took turns showing me their favorite presents. James and Jacob, the 15-year-old twins, had apparently appointed themselves Christmas managers and were organizing games for the younger children. Emily, at 12, was helping in the kitchen alongside her mother. Even little Noah, just 3, wanted to tell me about the toy train he'd received. Grandma, Sophia, Rachel's 13-year-old, asked, "Are you having fun at your hotel?" "I am, sweetheart," I said truthfully. "Aunt Eleanor and I went for a walk in the snow today, and we're going to the spa tomorrow." "Good," she nodded seriously. "Dad says you deserve a break because you always take care of everybody else." After speaking with each grandchild, the adults came back on screen. They looked tired, but less frantic than earlier in the day. "We've got everything under control, Mom," Michael assured me, though the stack of dishes visible behind him suggested otherwise. "You enjoy your vacation." "We've been talking," Rachel added, "about how things need to change when you get back, but we can discuss that later." As the call ended, I felt a mix of emotions, guilt at not being there with them, amusement at their obvious struggles, and a tentative hope that this experience might lead to real change. After we hung up, Eleanor and I settled by the fireplace in her room with cups of tea. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking that this is the first Christmas I've enjoyed since Frank died," I admitted, "and I feel terrible about that." "Why? Because you're not exhausting yourself catering to people who don't appreciate it." Put that way, it did sound absurd. I guess I'm still struggling with the idea that taking care of myself isn't selfish. "Maggie," Eleanor said gently, "you've spent your entire adult life putting others first. You raised 3 children, helped raise 9 grandchildren, and created beautiful holiday memories for all of them. Taking a few days for yourself doesn't erase all of that." We stayed up late that night, sharing memories of our childhood Christmases and talking about Frank. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge how lonely I'd been these past 5 years, how much I missed having a partner to share the burden of family gatherings. The next morning brought an unexpected development. A snowstorm had moved in overnight, dropping nearly 2 feet of snow and making the roads impassable. The resort staff informed us that we'd likely be snowed in for at least another day beyond our planned departure. When I called to tell my children, their initial concern quickly gave way to determination. "Don't worry about a thing, Mom," David insisted. "We'll handle everything until you can safely return." The unexpected extension of my rebellion turned out to be a gift. Eleanor and I spent the extra day enjoying the resort spa, playing board games by the fire, and simply relaxing. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had so little responsibility, so little to do. By the time the roads cleared and it was time to return home, I felt rested in a way I hadn't in years. The constant ache in my shoulders from stress had eased. I'd slept through the night without waking to worry about to-do lists. I'd remembered what it felt like to be Margaret the person, not just mom or grandma or hostess. As I packed my suitcase on our final morning, Eleanor watched from the doorway. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "When you go back?" I folded a sweater carefully. "I'm going to have an honest conversation with my children about expectations and boundaries. I'm going to stop saying yes when I mean no. And," I added with a smile, "I'm going to start living my life for me sometimes, not just for them." Eleanor hugged me tightly. "Frank would be proud of you," she whispered. "I know I am." The drive back from Mountain Pine Resort felt entirely different from the tense, emotional journey 3 days earlier. The roads were clear, the sun was shining, and I felt a sense of purpose and calm I hadn't experienced in years. I was going home not as the taken-for-granted matriarch, but as a woman who had finally stood up for herself. Still, as I turned onto my street, nervousness fluttered in my stomach. How would they receive me? Would the tentative understanding we'd reached over phone calls and texts hold up in person? Or would they resent me for disrupting their comfortable status quo? I was surprised to see all three of my children's cars parked in my driveway and along the curb. They weren't supposed to be here until evening for our planned family meeting. As I pulled in behind David's SUV, my front door opened, and all three of them stepped onto the porch. The house behind them was decorated with a hand-painted banner. "Welcome home, Mom." I blinked back unexpected tears at the sight. They came to greet me as I got out of the car, Michael reaching for my suitcase, while Rachel and David each took one of my arms. "What's all this?" I asked, gesturing to the banner. "We wanted to welcome you properly," Rachel explained, leading me toward the house. "And we've been busy while you were gone," David added with a smile that reminded me of Frank. As I stepped inside, I gasped in surprise. My house was spotless cleaner, perhaps, than it had been in years. The Christmas decorations were still up, but the usual post-holiday mess was nowhere to be seen. The hardwood floors gleamed with fresh polish. Even the windows sparkled. "You cleaned?" I asked, unable to keep the shock from my voice. Michael nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "We realized none of us had really helped maintain the house since Dad died. You've been doing it all yourself." "Come see the kitchen," Rachel urged, pulling me forward. The kitchen had always been my domain, my sanctuary and workspace combined. Now it shone with a cleanliness that spoke of hours of effort. The copper-bottomed pots Frank had given me for our 30th anniversary hung polished and gleaming on their rack. The countertops were clear and freshly sealed. Even the inside of the refrigerator had been cleaned and organized. "We found Dad's old home maintenance schedule in his desk," David explained. "All the things he used to do around the house, cleaning the gutters, sealing the countertops, checking the furnace filter. None of us had been doing any of it. We've divided it up between us now," Michael added. "Each family has taken responsibility for different tasks. We've got it all on a shared calendar." I was speechless. This was far more than I had expected from my small act of rebellion. "Where are the grandchildren?" I finally managed to ask. "And your spouses?" "The kids are at school and daycare," Rachel explained. "And the spouses are at work. We all took time off to be here when you got home. We wanted to talk to you, just us four." They led me to the living room, where they'd prepared coffee and some of my favorite cookies store-bought, but the effort touched me nonetheless. As we settled in, an awkward silence fell. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, I need to apologize properly, face to face. What you overheard me say was inexcusable. It was disrespectful and thoughtless, and I'm deeply sorry." "It wasn't just what you said," I replied quietly. "It was the plan itself, all three of you conspiring to use me as free childcare without even asking." They exchanged glances, and Rachel spoke next. "You're right, and it wasn't the first time we've done something like that. We've been taking advantage of your generosity for years, especially since Dad died. I think," David said slowly, "we got used to you always saying yes, always being available, always putting everyone else first. We stopped seeing it as a choice you were making and started seeing it as, I don't know, your role?" I suggested. "Your purpose?" He nodded, looking ashamed. "Something like that. Which is terrible, now that I say it out loud." "After you left," Michael continued, "we talked a lot about how things have been since Dad died, about how we've all leaned on you without offering much support in return, about how we've taken for granted all the work you do to keep this family connected. We realized something important," Rachel added. "We've been treating you like you're just our mother, just the kids' grandmother, as if that's your entire identity. But you're a whole person, Mom, with your own needs and desires in life. And we've been ignoring that." Their words touched something deep inside me, a longing to be seen as more than my relational roles. "I felt invisible," I admitted. "Like all that matters is what I can do for everyone else." "That changes now," Michael said firmly. "We've made some decisions, if you're okay with them." They outlined their plan. Monthly family dinners would rotate between all four households instead of always being at mine. Holiday hosting would also rotate, with clear assignments for who would handle cooking, cleaning, and activities. Each adult would contribute to a shared fund for holiday expenses instead of leaving me to absorb all the costs. And most importantly, they would stop making assumptions about my availability and start asking with the understanding that no was a perfectly acceptable answer. "And we want you to take more time for yourself," David added. "Eleanor told us you've been talking about taking a painting class. We want you to do that, and anything else you've been putting off. We've already signed you up, Rachel smiled, pulling out a gift certificate for an 8-week course at the local art center, starting next month. I was overwhelmed by their thoughtfulness and apparent sincerity. This all sounds wonderful, I said cautiously. But will it last? Or will we slip back into old patterns after a few weeks? That's why we've put everything in writing, Michael replied, producing a folder. We're calling it the Family Respect Agreement. It outlines all our commitments, with specific responsibilities assigned to each person. I laughed through my tears. You're certainly Frank's children. He loved a good written agreement. We know this doesn't make up for years of taking you for granted, Rachel said, taking my hand. But it's a start. We want to do better, Mom. We love you. That evening, all 3 families returned for dinner, which they had arranged to be catered, so I wouldn't have to cook on my first day back. The grandchildren greeted me with enthusiastic hugs and handmade welcome cards. Even the teenagers seemed genuinely happy to see me. As we gathered around the table, which had been set by my daughters-in-law without any input from me, I looked at the faces of my family. There was a new awareness in the adults' eyes, a recognition of me as a person with my own needs and boundaries. And there was something else, too. Respect. I caught James, my oldest grandson, watching me with a small smile. What? I asked him quietly. He leaned over and whispered, I'm glad you stood up for yourself, Grandma. It was pretty cool. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. In the weeks that followed my Christmas rebellion, as my family came to call it, I observed subtle but significant changes in our dynamics. The most immediate and obvious change was in how my children interacted with me. Gone were the assumptions about my availability, the casual requests that were really demands, the taking for granted of my time and energy. Now, invitations came with genuine options to decline. Mom, we'd love to have you over for dinner on Sunday, but if you're busy or just want some time to yourself, we completely understand. The first few times, I suspect they expected me to automatically say yes, as I always had. They seemed pleasantly surprised when occasionally I would say, Thank you for the invitation, but I've actually made other plans. Those other plans were another change. I'd started filling my calendar with activities just for me. The painting class my children had enrolled me in became the highlight of my week. I discovered I had a modest talent for watercolors, particularly landscapes inspired by the view from the mountain resort. My instructor encouraged me to enter a piece in the local senior center's art show, where it received an honorable mention. I also joined Eleanor for a weekly lunch, followed by either a movie or a visit to a museum. Our relationship, which had drifted into occasional phone calls and holiday visits after I married Frank, blossomed into a close friendship. She introduced me to her circle of friends, dynamic, interesting women who, like her, had built fulfilling lives outside of traditional family structures. You seem different, Eleanor observed over lunch, about a month after Christmas. More confident, more yourself. I considered this. I think I am more myself. For years, I defined myself entirely through my relationships to others. Frank's wife, the children's mother, the grandchildren's grandmother. I'd forgotten how to just be Margaret. And how does Margaret feel about all the changes? I smiled. Lighter. Like I've set down a heavy burden I didn't even realize I was carrying. The family meeting we'd had upon my return had led to concrete changes in how family responsibilities were distributed. Michael and Jennifer hosted the January family dinner with clear assignments for who would bring what. The meal wasn't perfect. Jennifer overcooked the roast, but the effort was sincere, and I enjoyed simply being a guest. In February, Rachel and Thomas hosted, their home less spacious than mine, but warm and welcoming. Rachel had created a detailed schedule to ensure everyone knew their responsibilities. Again, there were small mishaps. The rolls were forgotten in the oven until they were nearly charred, but there was also laughter and a sense of shared purpose I hadn't felt in our family gatherings for some time. There were occasional regressions, of course. Old habits die hard. Michael sometimes slipped into his old patterns, making assumptions about my availability or forgetting his commitments. But now, instead of silently accommodating him, I would gently but firmly remind him of our agreement. Michael, we decided that you would handle the Easter egg hunt this year. I'm happy to help, but it's your responsibility to organize. At first, these boundaries were uncomfortable for both of us. I felt guilty for not immediately stepping in to solve everyone's problems. He felt frustrated at having his requests redirected back to him. But gradually, we found a new equilibrium, one based on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. I also had to acknowledge my own role in creating the dynamic I'd rebelled against. For years, I'd said yes when I meant no. I'd prioritized everyone else's needs above my own. I'd established patterns that became expectations. Breaking those patterns required changes from me as well as from my children. Rachel and I had a particularly healing conversation about this one afternoon while walking in the park. "I've been thinking about why it was so easy for us to take advantage of you," she said. "And I realized it's because you never showed us when you were struggling. You always made everything look effortless, like you enjoyed doing it all." "I did enjoy much of it," I admitted. "I love this family. I love creating special moments for all of you. But you're right, I never let anyone see the cost. I never wanted to appear weak or incapable." "But Mom," she said, stopping to face me, "asking for help isn't weakness. It's just being human." Her words echoed in my mind for days afterward. How much of my resentment could have been avoided if I'd simply been honest about my limitations? If I'd allowed my children to see me as a full human being with strengths and weaknesses, needs and boundaries, rather than presenting a perfectly capable, endlessly giving facade, my conversations with the grandchildren evolved too. The older ones, particularly the teenagers, began to see me as more than just grandma. James, now 16, asked about my life before I had children, curious about who I'd been as a young woman. Sophia wanted to know about my teaching career and what it had been like to work with young children for so many years. Even my relationship with Frank's memory shifted. For 5 years, I'd been trying to preserve everything exactly as it had been when he was alive, as if changing anything would somehow dishonor him. Now, I allowed myself to imagine what he would actually want for me, not a life frozen in the past, but one that continued to evolve and find new joys. One evening, while sorting through some of his old books, I found a letter he'd written to me, but never given. It was dated just a few months before his death, when perhaps he'd sensed his time was growing short. "My dearest Margaret," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I want you to know that the life we've built together has been more wonderful than I ever deserved. But if I'm no longer there, please don't try to maintain everything just as it was. Change what needs changing. Find new adventures. Be happy, not just for the sake of the children or grandchildren, but for yourself. You deserve joy of your own, not just the reflected joy of others." Through my tears, I laughed at Frank's typical foresight. Even from beyond, he was giving me permission to evolve, to prioritize my own happiness. When David called to remind me that it was his turn to host the March family dinner, he asked if I'd bring my famous apple pie. "Actually," I said, surprising both of us, "I think I'll try a new recipe this time, something different." It was a small thing, this deviation from decades of tradition. But it represented something much larger, my willingness to let go of the past and embrace new possibilities. "Sounds great, Mom," he said after a brief pause. "We're looking forward to it." As December rolled around again, I found myself surprisingly calm about the approaching holiday. Unlike previous years, when I'd start stressing about Christmas preparations before Thanksgiving was even over, I felt a sense of peaceful anticipation. Much had changed in the year since my Christmas rebellion. The family rotational system for hosting gatherings had become our new normal, with each household taking responsibility for different aspects of our celebrations. My children had, for the most part, honored the commitments they'd made in our family respect agreement, and I'd grown more comfortable enforcing my boundaries when necessary. This Christmas, we'd decided to have Christmas Eve dinner at Michael and Jennifer's house, Christmas morning brunch at Rachel and Thomas's, and Christmas dinner back at my place, but with everyone contributing specific dishes and handling designated tasks. As I pulled out the boxes of Christmas decorations, memories of last year's dramatic events made me smile. What had seemed like a traumatic rupture at the time had actually been the beginning of a healthier, more balanced family dynamic. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was David and his family, arriving to help decorate the tree, a task they'd volunteered for this year. Grandma, Noah, now 4, ran to hug my legs. "We brought cookies and hot chocolate, and ornament hooks," Catherine added, holding up a package. "David realized you were running low last year. I was touched by their thoughtfulness. Thank you. Come in, come in." Soon the house was filled with Christmas music and the sounds of the children excitedly unpacking ornaments. Unlike previous years, when I would have been anxiously supervising every detail, I sat in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea, offering occasional guidance, but mostly just enjoying the scene. "Mom," David said, sitting beside me while Catherine helped the children hang ornaments, "I've been meaning to tell you something. The way you stood up for yourself last Christmas. It changed more than just how we treat you. It changed how I think about my relationships with everyone." "What do you mean?" I asked. I realized I had been doing the same thing to Catherine that we were doing to you, expecting her to handle all the emotional labor in our family, all the planning and organizing and remembering. Since then, I've tried to be more conscious of that imbalance, to take on more of those responsibilities myself. "What does Catherine think of this new David?" I asked with a smile. He laughed. "She says she likes me better now. And honestly, I like myself better too. It feels good to be a true partner, not just someone who shows up and takes credit." Similar conversations happened with my other children as Christmas approached. Rachel confessed that my example had inspired her to set better boundaries at work, where she'd been routinely accepting assignments beyond her job description without additional compensation. "I finally told my boss that I needed either a promotion that reflected my actual responsibilities or a reduction in workload," she told me over coffee. "Guess what? I got the promotion." "That's wonderful, Rachel," I said proudly. "I'm so happy for you. I kept thinking about what you said, that always saying yes when you mean no doesn't actually help anyone in the long run. It just creates unsustainable expectations." Even Michael, always the most resistant to change, showed signs of growth. When he and Jennifer arrived for the tree lighting ceremony in the town square, an annual tradition I'd always organized, he handed me a steaming cup of my favorite peppermint hot chocolate. "I remembered you saying last year that you never got to enjoy the ceremony because you were always busy making sure everyone else had what they needed," he explained. "So Jennifer and I thought we'd take over that part this year." True to their word, they had brought thermoses of hot drinks, a blanket for us to sit on, and even remembered the special cookies I liked to nibble while watching the lights. It was a small gesture, but it represented a significant shift in awareness. As Christmas Eve arrived, I drove to Michael and Jennifer's house with a sense of curiosity about how they would handle hosting. Their home was beautifully decorated, though in a style different from my traditional approach, more modern, with a color scheme of blue and silver rather than my usual red and green. "Welcome, Mom," Jennifer greeted me warmly, taking my coat. "We're so glad you're here." Dinner was served on their wedding china, which I'd rarely seen them use. Michael had prepared his father's famous prime rib, working from Frank's handwritten recipe. Jennifer had coordinated the side dishes brought by various family members. The grandchildren, dressed in their holiday best, were on their best behavior, clearly understanding the significance of this new tradition. After dinner, as we gathered in their living room for the gift exchange, Michael raised his glass in a toast. "To Mom," he said, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. "Thank you for teaching us, even when it had to be the hard way, that family means supporting each other, not taking each other for granted. And to Dad, who I think would be proud of how we're evolving as a family." "Hear, hear," the others echoed, raising their glasses. Later that night, as I prepared for bed in my quiet house, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The next day would be busy with more family gatherings, but now the joy of those gatherings didn't come at the cost of my own well-being. Christmas morning at Rachel and Thomas's was chaotic but joyful, with the grandchildren excitedly opening presents and everyone enjoying the breakfast casserole that had become a family tradition, though this year Rachel had made it rather than me. And Christmas dinner at my house was perhaps the most relaxed holiday meal I'd ever hosted. Each adult arrived with their assigned dish. Michael and David handled the table setting. Jennifer and Catherine organized the serving. Rachel and Thomas supervised the children. I contributed my part, the turkey, and my new experimental cranberry sauce recipe, but I also had time to sit and chat, to play with the grandchildren, to simply be present in a way I rarely had been before. As we gathered around the table, I looked at the faces of my family, my children and their spouses, my grandchildren from teenagers down to preschoolers, and felt a wave of gratitude for the journey we'd taken together over the past year. "Before we eat," I said, "I'd like to say something." The table quieted as everyone turned to me. A year ago, I made a difficult choice that changed our family. It wasn't easy for any of us, but looking around this table today, I'm grateful for where that choice has led us. We're stronger now, more considerate of each other, more aware of what it truly means to be family. I raised my glass. To family not perfect, but perfectly ours. To family, they echoed, glasses clinking around the table. After dinner, as the kitchen cleanup crew Michael, David, and Thomas this year tackled the dishes, James approached me where I sat by the fireplace. "Grandma," he said, now tall enough to look me directly in the eyes, "I've been thinking about something. Last Christmas, when you left and made everyone realize how they'd been treating you, that was kind of badass." I laughed in surprise. "I don't know if I'd use that term, but thank you, I think." "No, seriously," he insisted. "It taught me something important, about standing up for yourself even when it's hard, about not letting people treat you badly just because they're family." His words touched me deeply. Perhaps the most valuable legacy of my Christmas rebellion wasn't just the improvement in how my children treated me, but the example it set for the next generation about healthy boundaries and self-respect. Later that evening, as the last of the family prepared to leave, Rachel hugged me tightly. "Merry Christmas, Mom," she whispered. "Thank you for giving us the chance to be better." As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my entryway, looking at my home still festive with decorations, but not perfectly neat. Lived in and loved, rather than a showplace of holiday perfection. Frank's portrait smiled down from the wall, and I could almost hear his approving chuckle. "You were right, Frank," I said softly to his image. "Change was exactly what we needed." I've learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family isn't endless sacrifice, it's showing them how to respect and value each other, including yourself. If my story has resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family boundaries in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with loved ones? What happened when you did? If this story helped you feel less alone in your family struggles, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about navigating complex family dynamics. And if you know someone who might benefit from this message, sharing is the greatest gift you can give. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and remember, it's never too late to change how others treat you. The best family traditions are the ones built on mutual respect and genuine love.